Unlike the other franchise history videos covered on this channel so far, we don't have to look all that far back to trace the origins of the Seattle Seahawks. In fact, our story really begins with the merging of the NFL and AFL in 1970. The merge of the two biggest professional football leagues in North America strengthened the sport and led to the planning of 2 new teams to join the league, bringing the total to 28 teams. After years of several different groups flirting with the idea, finally in June of 1974, NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle awarded a group of Seattle local businessmen and community leaders an expansion franchise. In December of 1974, the franchise agreement would officially be signed by Lloyd Nordstrom of the Nordstrom family, who would be the majority owners of Seattle's new team. The next big question was, what should the team name be? To solve this, the franchise held a public naming contest that saw over 20,000 entries. 5 names would be chosen as finalists: the Sockeyes, Mariners, Olympics, Evergreens, and Seahawks. Nordstrom and the Seattle ownership group presented the names to Commissioner Rozelle, and as we all know, the name that was chosen was, of course, the Seattle Seahawks. As a quick aside, this was actually not the first time the Seahawks nickname was used for a professional football team. The Miami Seahawks in 1946 were the first to use the name, although there's no relation to the Seattle Seahawks. To learn more about the Miami Seahawks, check out my video on the history of the Indianapolis Colts. Anyways, back to the Seattle Seahawks, who would hire John Thompson to be their first general manager, and then Minnesota Vikings assistant coach Jack Patera to be their head coach of this new team. An expansion draft would be held in March of 1976, in which the Seattle Seahawks and the second new expansion team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, alternated in selecting players from the other 26 teams in the NFL. Afterwards, the Seahawks would continue filling out their roster with several rookies taken in the 1976 NFL Draft, most notably defensive tackle Steve Niehaus, who would be taken with the second overall pick in the draft. But the Seahawks' best player acquisition didn't come until the middle of the preseason, when the Seahawks traded a 1977 8th-round draft pick to the Houston Oilers in exchange for a roster bubble rookie wide receiver by the name of Steve Largent. Seattle fans would get to know that name pretty well over the next 13 years. And with that, the Seattle Seahawks were ready to kick off their inaugural season in 1976 with a Week 1 matchup against the St. Louis Cardinals, which they would lose. In fact, they wouldn't win a game until Week 6 and finished their first season with a total of just 2 wins and 12 losses. And really, what more can you expect from an expansion team? But there were some bright spots that garnered hope for the near future of this franchise. Steve Largent, the rookie wide receiver that they traded for in the preseason, had led the team in receiving yards with 700, with the help of rookie quarterback Jim Zorn, who was top 10 in passing yards as a rookie, but also led the league in interceptions by a large margin. And on the defensive side, the former second overall pick in the draft, Steve Niehaus, was a member of the all-rookie team and the NFC Defensive Rookie of the Year, getting 9.5 sacks. The team improved to 5-9 in their second season before achieving a winning record for the first time at 9-7 in 1978. This was in large part thanks to receiver Steve Largent, who continued to impress and finished second out of the entire NFL with 1,168 receiving yards that season. Head coach Jack Patera would win NFL Coach of the Year for his turnaround of this new expansion team. However, it wasn't all good news. Defensive lineman and former rookie standout Steve Niehaus had suffered several injuries over the last couple of seasons, and his career would be cut short, finishing with just 10.5 career sacks after getting 9.5 in his rookie year. But the Seattle Seahawks pushed forward and finished 9-7 the next season as well, with another top 10 offensive performance. Yet despite this, they had missed the playoffs in both years, and the wheels fell off in 1980 as the team fell back to 4-12, followed by a 6-10 finish in 1981. A strike-shortened 1982 season would spell the end of their first ever head coach, Jack Patera, who would be let go after another 2 losses to start the season. 1983 would mark a new era for the Seattle Seahawks under head coach Chuck Knox, quarterback Dave Craig, and standout running back Kurt Warner. One thing that would remain constant from that previous era though was Steve Largent, continuing to finish in the top of the league in receiving yards. This new group would hit it off immediately, going 9-7 in their first season together and earning the Seahawks their first playoff appearance in team history. But it wasn't just their first playoff appearance, but also their first playoff win, beating John Elway's Denver Broncos in the wildcard round, and then beating Dan Marino's Miami Dolphins in the divisional round. And suddenly, the Seattle Seahawks, who didn't exist 8 years ago, were in the AFC Championship game. Unfortunately, the magical ride would come to an end against the Oakland Raiders, who beat them quite handedly. But overall, it was a great sign of things to come for the Seahawks. In 1984, the team finished with an astounding 12-4 record, but this time their playoff hopes were cut short, falling to the Miami Dolphins in the divisional round. The Seahawks would miss the playoffs entirely the next 2 seasons, even despite them getting 10 wins in 1986 with a squad they felt was Super Bowl caliber, but it just wasn't meant to be. But 9 wins would be good enough for the Seahawks to get into the playoffs in 87 and 88, yet again both of those trips to the postseason were cut short. 1989 to 1991 would mark the close of the Chuck Knox era for the Seattle Seahawks. His team would hover around 7 and 9 wins and miss the playoffs his last 3 seasons. As a still relatively young franchise, that success isn't terrible, but Knox himself had raised the bar of expectations and the team was hungry for more. Knox would finish his 9 years in Seattle with a record of 80 wins and 63 losses. But this wasn't the only massive change for the Seahawks. Their star from day one, Steve Largent, also rode off into the sunset. The 1988 Walter Payton Man of the Year, 7-time Pro Bowler, and 2-time NFL receiving yards leader called it a career. From roster bubble trade in the preseason to a Hall of Fame member that helped give immediate legitimacy to a brand new Seattle Seahawks franchise. A new page was turning for the Seahawks, but unfortunately that doesn't mean the grass was getting greener. Immediately following the departure of coach Chuck Knox, quarterback Dave Craig, and receiver Steve Largent saw a reset for the franchise. Former Raiders coach Tom Flores would be hired to take over the team, who Seahawks fans may remember as the coach that beat them in the surprise 1983 conference championship appearance. And unfortunately for Seattle fans, Tom Flores wasn't done screwing over the Seahawks. The roster bottomed out with a 2-14 finish in their first season of the post-Knox era. Flores' team would never get more than 6 wins in a season, and after just 3 years, he would be let go. Seahawks team owner Ken Behring was getting fed up with the team's recent lack of success. In an attempt to right the ship, the team brought in head coach Dennis Erickson. He was able to improve their record a little, but the Seahawks were still hovering around the zone of mediocrity between 7 and 8 wins. Being in an aging stadium and his team's most recent lack of success, owner Ken Behring announced he would relocate the Seattle Seahawks to Los Angeles, who had just recently lost the Rams to St. Louis. The NFL showed little enthusiasm for this move. Behring would move his team headquarters to California, but lawyers quickly pointed out that the Seahawks were tied to their previous stadium until at least 2005. On top of this, the NFL threatened to fine Behring $500,000 a day if he didn't bring his team headquarters back from California. Fed up with the situation in total, Behring eventually decided to simply sell the Seahawks. A bidder came forward under the condition that a new stadium would be built. Once an agreement on this new stadium was reached, the Seahawks found themselves under new ownership by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen. In 1997, under the new ownership, Seahawks swung for the fences and signed a veteran in Warren Moon at quarterback in hopes that he would push them over the top, but the results were still much the same. After 4 years at the helm, Erickson would be shown the door. The Seahawks needed to be bold in their next hire if they were ever going to get out of this dreaded mediocrity. And what better way to do that than getting one of the better coaches in the league and a former Super Bowl champion. New owner Paul Allen made a splash with the signing of former Green Bay Packers coach Mike Holmgren to be the new general manager and head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And the potential gain from such a signing was evident from the start. In Holmgren's inaugural season, he started 8-2 before stumbling down the stretch to a 9-7 finish and eventual wildcard loss to Dan Marino's Dolphins. The potential was there, but the roster just still wasn't ready. In 2000, the team drafted running back Shaun Alexander, who would go on to be a dominant force for this offense. and in 2001, Holmgren completed a trade to bring in Green Bay Packers backup quarterback Matt Hasselbeck to be his starter. With his guys in place to run the offense, the Seahawks began to pick up steam. But it wasn't just the on-field aspect of the team that oversaw large changes. 2002 also saw the brand new opening of Seahawks Stadium, today known as Lumen Field. And possibly the biggest change of all was the division realignment, which moved the Seahawks from the AFC West, a division they had been in since 1977, and returned them to the NFC West, the division they actually started in back in 1976. So with a fresh division, brand new stadium, revamped weapons on offense, and a talented head coach, the Seahawks were ready to make some noise. In 2003, the Seahawks returned to the playoffs after reaching double-digit wins for the first time in 17 years. The team's recent success had them feeling pretty confident, and they felt good about their chances against Holmgren's former team, the Green Bay Packers, in the wildcard round. The Seahawks started slow in the first half, down 6-13 going into halftime, but then came roaring back in the second half, only to give up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and end up in overtime. What ensued was one of the most memorable and embarrassing moments in playoff history. During the coin toss in overtime, quarterback Matt Hasselbeck was caught on mic proclaiming, "We want the ball and we're going to score." Ultimately, Hasselbeck would throw an interception, and that would be returned for a game-winning defensive touchdown by Packers defensive back Al Harris. So his prediction was correct. He was going to get the ball, and they were going to score just, for the other team. But even with such a disheartening loss like that, the 2003 playoff appearance was just the beginning of what would become 5 straight playoff berths. The crown jewel of the Holmgren era would come in 2005, when the Seahawks finished the regular season with 13 wins, the most ever in franchise history to that point. The team was well balanced, with the number 1 scoring offense in the league and the 7th best scoring defense. But the true star of the show was running back Shaun Alexander, who had been stringing together solid seasons since he took over as a starter in 2001. But in 2005, he was on a different level. He finished the regular season with 1,880 rushing yards and a crazy 27 rushing touchdowns, earning him both Offensive Player of the Year honors and the NFL MVP award. Seattle was a true powerhouse who easily made their way through the playoff field, defeating the Washington Redskins 20-10, marking the Seahawks' first playoff win in over 2 decades. The team would march right over the Carolina Panthers in the conference championship to book their ticket to Super Bowl 40 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. For the first time in their 29 years of existence, the Seattle Seahawks were in the Super Bowl. The Seahawks would open the game with a 3-0 lead at the end of the first quarter, but from there it was a tough sledding. The Steelers would begin to put together explosive scoring plays, scoring a touchdown in each of the 3 remaining quarters of the game. The Seahawks offense was unable to keep up. Poor execution didn't help, but for many it was the questionable officiating that cost the Seahawks a chance to win the game. Several key calls late in the game hurt the Seahawks, who would ultimately lose the big game 10-21. I'm usually not one personally to blame refs on the game. I'm usually in the mindset that if you want your team to win, don't leave it up to where the refs can decide for you. But there are some instances where officiating should be called out, and in this case, it was. Immediately following the game, the NFL made a statement that the Super Bowl was called just like any other game, with the decisions that maybe some disagree with. But it was later that things began to open up. Coach Mike Holmgren would openly say, quote, "We knew it was going to be tough against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I didn't know we were also going to have to play the guys in striped shirts as well." End quote. Holmgren would not be fined for this statement, and Al Michaels would later speculate during a Sunday Night Football game that the NFL's lack of discipline for such commentary on the refs possibly indicated the NFL knew the officiating wasn't good. But if that wasn't clear enough, referee Bill Levy, who officiated that Super Bowl, would later openly apologize to Seattle Seahawks fans, saying, quote, "It was tough for me. I kicked 2 calls in the fourth quarter and I impacted the game, and as an official, you never want to do that. It left me with a lot of sleepless nights, and I think I'll go to my grave wishing I had done better." End quote. The Seahawks would try to shake off the Super Bowl loss with a return to the postseason in 2006 after winning the division with a 9-7 record. Their wildcard matchup against the Dallas Cowboys would produce another memorable and embarrassing moment in playoff history, but this time they were on the right side of the coin. The Seahawks were leading 21-20 with a little over a minute remaining in the game. The bad news? The Cowboys were set up to kick an easy 19-yard field goal to take the lead. Well, that was until quarterback Tony Romo, the holder on the kick, fumbled the ball on the snap, attempted to rush it for the first down himself to salvage the broken play, but ultimately was tackled short. The Seahawks would then simply close out the last remaining seconds of the game and advance to the divisional round. But there they would lose to the Chicago Bears in overtime. 2007 continued the Seahawks streak with a fourth consecutive NFC West title, but again the team would lose in the divisional round of the playoffs. 2008 would mark the end of an era. Shaun Alexander would be let go before the season, and Mike Holmgren would announce that this season would be his last. The roster was full of aging players who missed significant time with injuries, including quarterback Matt Hasselbeck. The Seahawks window had closed, and the team fumbled its way to a 4-12 finish. Mike Holmgren would walk away from the Seahawks with a coaching record of 86-74 over his decade in Seattle, along with a Super Bowl appearance. Jim Mora, Holmgren's defensive backs coach, was named as Holmgren's successor in 2009 to take over the reins. Mora's team made several splash moves in free agency, but Mora didn't seem ready for the opportunity. The team slowed down significantly late in the year, including 4 straight blowout losses. Mora was also criticized by fans for publicly calling out his kicker following a close loss, and then openly questioning the toughness of injured starting center Chris Spencer. Mora's Seahawks would finish 5-11, and Mora would be let go after just one season. The team was in need of another fresh start, a new perspective and big name to rejuvenate the franchise, and some coach named Pete Carroll was just the guy for the job. Coming off a great run in the collegiate levels, Pete Carroll looked to bring a new energy to the Seattle Seahawks, and his new culture hit the ground running. His first season as a head coach in 2010 was marked with its ups and downs and definite fair share of blowout losses. However, the NFC West was so bad the Seahawks snuck into the playoffs with a 7-9 record. This was the first time in NFL history a team with a losing record was crowned a division champion. The reward for being the best of the losers in their division? A matchup against the defending Super Bowl champion New Orleans Saints, who just earlier that season delivered Seattle one of the blowout losses I just talked about. And things started as you would expect. The Seahawks were down 10 points early, but this resilient squad kept fighting. And next thing you know, Matt Hasselbeck had thrown 4 touchdowns, and Seattle has a chance to likely seal the game with another score. And what happens next would become one of the most memorable moments in recent Seahawks history. Running back Marshawn Lynch, who the team had traded for just earlier this year, exploded down the field, breaking tackle after tackle on his way to a 67-yard touchdown. The crowd erupted with such enthusiasm that it actually registered as seismic activity. The run that helped seal one of the most improbable playoff wins in NFL history became known as the Beast Quake. However, the magic ran out the very next week and reality set back in as the team got demolished by the Chicago Bears in the divisional round. Carroll had proven his way of doing things could work in the NFL by squeezing enough wins out of his team to win the division last year, but clearly there was a lot of work still to be done. The roster was in need of a reset, and that started with the departure of longtime starting quarterback Matt Hasselbeck. Carroll's Seahawks would again finish 7-9, but this time they would not get a surprise playoff appearance. But it was also enough wins to push them out of contention for one of the 3 big-name quarterbacks in the 2012 draft. Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III, and Ryan Tannehill would all go off the board way earlier. The Seahawks had planned on this during the offseason and signed quarterback Matt Flynn to be their starter. But Seattle wasn't done adding to the room. They also drafted a quarterback named Russell Wilson in the 3rd round to compete with Flynn. The defense was also rejuvenated with names like Bruce Irvin and Bobby Wagner. To put the cherry on top of this new page in Seahawks history, the team also updated their logo and uniform. A new era was ready to roll. Russell Wilson impressed enough to immediately take over the starting role as a rookie, and when paired up with the strong running game of Marshawn Lynch and a feisty defense, success came quick. The Seahawks would finish 11-5 in Carroll's first year with Wilson, and win their wildcard matchup against Washington before losing a close game against Atlanta Falcons in the divisional round. By 2013, the offense was fully clicking, and the Legion of Boom was earning their nickname on defense, led by superstars Bobby Wagner, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor. The Seahawks bullied their way through the regular season en route to a 13-3 finish and a first-round bye in the playoffs. The team would defeat the Saints in the divisional round before a thrilling victory against the San Francisco 49ers off an interception in the end zone in the final minute of the game. And with that win in the conference championship, the Seattle Seahawks would advance to their second Super Bowl appearance in their 37-year history. This time, it would be Seattle's #1 ranked defense against a record-breaking #1 offense of Peyton Manning's Denver Broncos. It sounds like an intense chess match of strength versus strength, but instead what resulted was one of the lamest Super Bowls in history, at least for anybody besides Seahawks fans. The Seahawks would get points on the board within the first 12 seconds of the game as a high snap flew over Manning's head and out the back of the end zone, resulting in a safety. And the onslaught continued from there, including Percy Harvin returning the second half kickoff for a touchdown. The final score would be 43-8. Pete Carroll, his Legion of Boom defense, and Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch had secured the Seattle Seahawks their first Lombardi trophy in team history. And with a strong, youthful core of talent, the Seahawks looked poised to sustain their championship window. The Seahawks followed up their 2013 Super Bowl season with 12 wins and another first-round bye in the playoffs. The Legion of Boom defense was once again the #1 defense in the league, and the offense was humming at a top 10 level as well, and it showed as they rolled past the Panthers in the divisional round and then the Packers in the NFC Championship, meaning the Seahawks had the opportunity to repeat as Super Bowl champions and kick off what could potentially be a dynasty. The team standing in their way of potential greatness, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick of the New England Patriots. This Super Bowl would be much closer. In fact, it would be quite the opposite of last year's Super Bowl, and because Seattle seems to attract memorable playoff moments, this one also had one of the most iconic plays in Super Bowl history. The game started out scoreless in the first quarter before Tom Brady got the Patriots on the board in the second quarter. Marshawn Lynch would then tie the game as we neared the 2-minute warning. Tom Brady responded by working his magic down the field, scoring with only 30 seconds left in the half. But not to be outdone, Russell Wilson then led the Seahawks on a masterful drive, scoring a touchdown with only 6 seconds left to tie the game going into halftime. Seattle then took over in the third quarter, scoring 10 unanswered points, but everybody knows not to count out Tom Brady. And sure enough, the Patriots scored their own unanswered 14 points to take the lead at the 2-minute warning. Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch would have one last shot to score a touchdown and win their second Super Bowl in a row. Wilson answered that call with a couple of 30-yard bombs to put the Seahawks in position to score with a minute left on the clock. Marshawn Lynch would then take a 4-yard carry to move Seattle to the 1-yard line with now 26 seconds remaining. The Seahawks were 1 yard away from accomplishing the rare repeat Super Bowl and kickstarting a potential dynasty. And with a timeout still in their pocket, they had options. They could still hand it off to Lynch to bulldoze his way in, or they could take a couple shots passing. But the football gods are cruel, and Seattle would not end up on the right side of this memorable playoff moment. Pete Carroll elected to have Russell Wilson throw the ball, and in a split second, Seattle's hopes were deflated as Malcolm Butler jumped in front of the pass and intercepted it on the goal line. A few Tom Brady kneels later, and the Seahawks would lose their third Super Bowl 24-28. The Super Bowl loss was crushing, but the Seahawks still had a talented team and looked to get right back to work. Carroll's Seahawks would win 10 or more games in 8 of their 9 seasons between 2012 and 2020. But besides for their 2 Super Bowl appearances, they were never able to advance past the divisional round in the playoffs. As the team aged and new faces came in, the team transitioned from the Legion of Boom defense and a strong run game to a team carried by Russell Wilson. Either way, they couldn't seem to get back over that playoff hump. Carroll Seahawks were always a tough team to beat that nobody wanted to play against, but their championship window would close without another Super Bowl appearance. Following the 2021 season, the Seahawks moved on from franchise quarterback Russell Wilson, marking the official end of an era. 2022 would be a reset for the franchise, but Pete Carroll's program is strong enough that he managed to sneak into the wildcard round behind an unexpected season from quarterback Geno Smith and a scrappy young defense. One has to wonder how many seasons Pete Carroll has left in the tank at 71 years old, entering his 14th year in Seattle. But as long as he is there, it seems the Seahawks have a chance. The team has some young pieces in place and will need to continue to rebuild their roster. It is both an exciting and scary time to be a Seahawks fan. The potential is all there, but will the team be able to capitalize, and will Pete Carroll be able to keep on coaching? Those are the questions that only time will answer, but if I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, I'm excited to watch where this team is heading. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this beast of a video. If you watched it this far, I greatly appreciate it. Comment below this video, 12th man, so I know that you made it this far. If you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and if you'd like to stay notified of more content like this in the future, and you want to join our growing community, go ahead and hit the subscribe button as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.